She clawed through the frozen earth with a whimper that sounded almost human, then stopped, frozen, nose pressed to a tiny blue backpack half buried beneath the shed. The name stitched into it? Emily. But no body, no bones, just a chilling silence. What came next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The wind came down from the hills in slow, moaning gusts, pulling dead leaves across the gravel like whispers. It was the kind of late autumn morning that lingered on the edge of winter, where the sun was too pale to matter, and the air carried a bite of something older than frost. Matthew Kane squinted into the gray horizon, the trail crunching under his boots as he walked the perimeter of Pine Hollow, an overgrown tract of forest land once part of a state gamekeeper's domain. These days, no one came out here. Not the hunters, not the hikers, not even the drifters. There was nothing left but stories and rot. The shed caught his eye the way a splinter catches skin. Sagging, leaning slightly to the left like it had taken a blow years ago and never recovered. Tin roof rusted, slats peeling like old paint from a forgotten canvas. It wasn't supposed to be there, at least not on the map. But this land hadn't been updated in years, and the budget didn't allow for much maintenance. Still, Matthew logged everything. That was the job. Quiet, slow, unnoticed work. But what wasn't supposed to be there, what really wasn't, was the sound. A sharp, frantic scrape. Then again, and again. Matthew froze. It wasn't the wind. This was urgent. Alive. Claws. He moved carefully, hand resting on the utility knife at his belt as he stepped through the overgrowth. The noise grew louder, erratic. A deep whine followed, long and guttural, like something was trapped. Or mourning. As he came around the shed, he saw her. A Germanshepherd. Thin as a bone sketch, ribs showing through matted fur streaked with mud and sap. Her black and tan coat, dulled and clumped, shimmered only where the light struck sweat and grime. She was clawing at the ground just beneath the slats of the building, tail stiff, body tense. Her pads were torn raw, nails bloodied. She was shaking, not from cold, but obsession. Matthew stopped a few feet back. "Hey, girl," he called gently. She didn't even flinch. He tried again, stepping closer. She snapped her head toward him, eyes wide, wild, but she didn't attack, just barked, a sound that tore through the stillness like a warning flare, then turned back to her digging, dirt flying behind her in frenzied bursts. Something primal curled in Matthew's gut. This wasn't random. The dog wasn't lost. She was on a mission. He crouched, trying to peer into the shadows beneath the floorboards. But the angle was tight, and the space beneath the shed was low, dark, packed with years of fallen pine needles and hard earth. Still, something about the spot drew his attention like a magnet. The ground had been disturbed, recently. The air smelled off, like damp metal and mildew. And something else, sweet, but wrong. He looked at the shepherd again. Her eyes met his, not pleading, not afraid, demanding. "Okay," he muttered. "I'll help." He radioed dispatch, no backup available. Budget cuts again. Animal control was backlogged due to nearby fires. ETA, 2 days. Matthew stared at the dog. She was back to digging, more desperately now, like time mattered. So he returned that night. Flashlight in one hand, pry bar in the other, he knelt by the base of the shed and began pulling at the old boards. Nails squealed. Wood cracked like bones. The dog paced behind him, then shoved past, throwing herself at the softest patch of earth. She knew exactly where to go. And what she was about to uncover, neither of them was ready for. The first board gave way with a reluctant groan, and a gust of earth-laced air hit Matthew's face. It smelled like secrets, deep old ones that had no business seeing daylight. He paused, squinting into the widening gap beneath the shed, while the German shepherd hovered beside him like a soldier on overwatch. Her breathing was fast and shallow, more controlled now, but her body remained tight with tension. She wasn't just curious, she was guarding something. Matthew lay flat and pushed his flashlight through the hole, illuminating what looked like clawed dirt, roots, and remnants of disturbed ground. But something in the light's arc caught. A shape. No, a texture. Synthetic. Frayed at the edges. A corner of canvas, maybe. Dirty beige, stained. He reached for it, fingers brushing cold, packed soil, and tugged gently. The shepherd let out a low, warning growl. He stopped, staring at her. "Are you protecting something?" he whispered. "Or someone?" She whined then, ears back, and gave a low bark that didn't echo. It felt like a yes. With his heart pounding against his ribs, Matthew leaned in farther, using the pry bar to shift more dirt aside. It crumbled reluctantly, clumps falling inward as if the ground was resisting him. Then, suddenly, the earth collapsed beneath his hand. Just a few inches, but enough. A hollow space. He froze. Not big, not deep, but carved out with intent. He cleared more dirt. The edge of a duffel bag appeared, military style, olive green, reinforced seams. He slid it toward the opening, the shepherd backing off just enough to let him work. The bag was heavy, too heavy. He unzipped it slowly, bracing himself. Inside was a blanket, then a smaller bundle wrapped in flannel, soaked through and darkened. Matthew's hands trembled. He reached in, unwrapping layers, and then the breath left his body like a punch to the gut. It was a child's coat. Tiny, pink. He dropped it like it burned him. The shepherd stepped forward, nose down, and let out a soft, heartbreaking whimper. Then she laid down beside the hole, resting her muzzle near the bag as if in vigil. Matthew sat back hard. The pieces started to shift in his mind, reassembling into something terrible. The news from months ago. A family reported missing from the outskirts of town. A woman and her daughter. Authorities had searched, questioned, speculated. No sign of them. The husband had claimed they'd run off. No charges filed, no proof. Case went cold. And now this. Matthew stood, knees shaking, and stepped outside the shed to breathe. Cold air hit his face like a slap. He pulled his phone from his jacket with numb fingers and dialed the sheriff's office. The dispatcher answered, her voice bored and distant, until he said the words, "I found a buried bag, child's clothing. Looks bad. You need to send someone, now." Back inside, the shepherd hadn't moved. She lay like a statue, only her eyes shifting between the opening and Matthew. She didn't need to be told this wasn't over. Her loyalty extended beyond logic, beyond survival. She'd stayed here for days, maybe longer, without food or shelter. For what? Justice? Love? Something inside Matthew cracked at the thought. He'd seen loyalty before, in soldiers, in working dogs, in people trying to outrun their pasts. But this was something holy, sacred in its silence. He reached down, brushing the dog's head gently. "You did good, girl. You held the line." Her tail wagged once, slow and tired. Then she closed her eyes, as if just for a moment she could finally rest. Outside, the sound of sirens was still a long way off, but justice, delayed as it might be, was finally on its way. And what they'd discover next would shake the foundation of the entire town. The shed was now cordoned off with yellow tape, glowing faintly under the low sun like a warning scrawl across the past. Matthew stood just beyond the perimeter as deputies moved in, each step careful, boots sinking into the damp earth that had once held secrets too dark for daylight. The German shepherd, her ribs visible now under the crusted fur, sat beside him, leashed but unmuzzled, eyes locked on the scene like a witness refusing to look away. Deputy Carla Jensen, mid-40s, sharp-featured and blunt, approached with a clipboard and a voice hoarse from too much coffee and too little patience. "Your name's Matthews, right? You said you live nearby?" "Yeah, Matthew Cole." He nodded. "I've got the place 2 properties over. I heard digging, came to check it out. That's when I found her." He gestured to the shepherd, who didn't react, only kept her head low and eyes fixed on the officers removing the duffel bag, now carefully sealed and tagged from the hole. Carla scribbled, her pen scratching like a scalpel. "And you swear the dog was alone? No signs of anyone else? Human?" "She was alone," he said. "But she wasn't just wandering. She was digging with purpose. She knew." Carla looked down at the dog with something bordering on respect. "You ever seen her before today?" He shook his head. One of the crime scene techs called out, "Hey, Jensen, there's more. Looks like another shallow cavity behind the first." Carla stiffened. "More?" Matthew stepped forward instinctively, but the shepherd beat him. The leash went taut as she surged toward the shed, then halted, ears pinned and body trembling, not with fear but with memory, like she knew what they were about to find. Matthew knelt, murmuring, "Easy, girl, easy." Her tail thumped once, then fell still. The second cavity yielded a blanket, and beneath it, bones, small. "Jesus," one tech muttered, snapping gloves tighter around his wrists. "It's a child." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Matthew sat down hard on the gravel. His mouth was dry, his heartbeat too loud in his ears. That coat hadn't been just a memory. It had belonged to someone real, someone who'd been left here under rotting boards and silence. And the dog? She'd known. All this time, she'd guarded the place like a sentinel, mourning her post. Jensen came back, her face pale now, voice quieter. "We'll need to bring in forensic anthropologists, but it's looking like this ties into the Stillwater case from last fall." Matthew remembered it then in full. The missing girl, Emily Hughes, 6 years old, vanished with her mother, Lauren. The husband, Joel Hughes, had made the news with his crocodile tears and clean alibi. No forced entry, no signs of a struggle, just gone. "Dog might have been theirs," he said aloud, not to anyone in particular. "She was here for a reason." Carla nodded. "If that pans out, we may finally have our break." The shepherd was now lying down again, her head between her paws, eyes blinking slowly. She was exhausted, her loyalty burning like a final wick. A vet had looked her over briefly, malnourished but no immediate injuries, no microchip, no collar. But she had purpose. You could see it in the way she watched every move the officers made, like she was still on duty, still guarding the truth. Matthew had been around dogs his whole life. Canines, service animals. Strays turned loyal, but never this. This was a kind of testimony, a silent statement that justice doesn't need words when presence is loud enough. A younger deputy approached with a water bowl. The shepherd sniffed it but didn't drink until Matthew touched the rim, giving her permission. She lapped slowly, methodically, like a soldier taking water between missions. "What do we call her?" the deputy asked, looking down at her. Matthew didn't hesitate. "Grace." Carla looked over. "Why that?" "Because after what she's been through," he said, "she's earned the name." The sun had dipped low and the shed looked more like a mausoleum now, its secrets no longer buried but bleeding out into the light. They hadn't found everything yet. But one thing was already clear. This dog hadn't just discovered a body. She'd carried the weight of 2 souls until someone finally listened. The morning after the discovery, Stillwater's town square felt like a church at dusk, quiet, heavy with waiting, every sound reverberating with unsaid things. At the sheriff's office, a press blackout had already been put in place. The last thing they needed was reporters stirring dust before the ground had even finished giving up its secrets. In the back room, Grace lay curled on a donated dog bed, still, but not asleep. She didn't rest anymore. She watched. Her ears flicked toward every sound in the hallway, every shift of boots or folders slapped onto desks. Her body had begun to regain some strength after the vet's fluids and food, but her gaze remained the same, anchored to some invisible point behind time, like she'd lived through something no human wanted to picture and was still waiting for the last part to resolve. Matthew sat beside her, cross-legged, holding a coffee that had long gone cold. He didn't drink it. He just needed something to hold. Sheriff Myra Coates was on the other side of the room, reviewing the fresh case notes, flipping pages too slowly, her jaw working the way it always did when she was chewing guilt instead of gum. "Lab confirmed," she finally said. "The bones match Lauren Hughes. They're estimating she's been dead about a year." Her voice dropped, clipped. "Strangulation. Clear signs of struggle." Matthew's throat tightened. "What about the second set?" "Child-sized, but incomplete. They're still working on identification. No sign of Emily's remains. Yet." He glanced down at Grace. Then, why was she still digging? Myra exhaled through her nose and leaned forward, elbows planted on the desk. Because she was looking for someone who isn't there. Or someone she still thinks is. The door creaked open. Deputy Jensen entered with a thick manila folder. "Joel Hughes just landed in Chicago. FBI picked him up at the airport. He'd changed his hair and rented a car under his brother's name. He ran." Myra stood slowly, her face unreadable. "Running doesn't mean guilt." "No," Jensen said, dropping the folder onto the desk with a loud thunk. "But this does." Photos spilled out, images taken from Joel's old property. A small buried safe, unearthed behind the shed where Grace had refused to leave. Inside, a series of receipts, journals, one of Emily's baby shoes, and a disposable phone, burner style, with messages never sent, including a draft text to M. Myra's hand hovered over the images. "Who's M?" Jensen shook her head. "No known match yet. Could be a partner, or just another victim. The contents are being analyzed, but what's clear is Joel's been back to the property in the last few months." Matthew stared at the shoe. Tiny, pink, weather-faded. It could have belonged to any little girl. But it didn't. It belonged to her. The same child who once played with Grace, whose scent likely never left the dog's mind, not even after storms and seasons. He knelt beside Grace, who looked up at him now with the softest, slowest blink, the kind dogs give when they're letting you know they understand more than you think. "You tried to tell us," he whispered, "and nobody listened." Grace inched forward and rested her head on his knee. Later that afternoon, they brought her back to the shed one final time. Not for evidence, but because she'd started whining the moment the car turned away from the woods. The vet had cleared her. Physically, she could handle it. Emotionally, Matthew figured she needed closure more than any of them did. The shed was now dismantled, the ground turned over, sifted, documented, and still, Grace pulled forward, toward the back edge of the lot, toward a patch the forensic team hadn't prioritized. Not because it didn't matter, just because the evidence so far had said the story ended 20 feet earlier. But Grace disagreed. She clawed at the earth, frantic now, growling softly, then yipping once, a sharp bark that cracked the air like a shot. Matthew dropped to his knees beside her. The soil here wasn't loose. It was packed, harder, more recent, and beneath the crust, Something shone. Plastic. Blue. They called the team over immediately. An hour later, they unearthed a small blue backpack, tattered, sun-bleached. Inside, a name stitched in cursive thread. Emily. Myra stood next to Matthew, her voice trembling even as she kept it low. "No remains. Just the bag. But it means she might have gotten away." Matthew nodded, his voice thick. "Grace didn't dig for bones this time. She dug for hope." And just like that, the story shifted, from a burial to a search, from death to a chance. Grace hadn't just unearthed the past. She had pointed toward a future no one believed still existed.